Hey YouTube, welcome back. We've been playing this build since the very beginning of patch 1.1. This is a Serpent Venom Swarmblade Serpent Strike build. We are a druid, we transform into Swarmblade form. We kind of look like Scyther or Kha'Zix, depending on which other media you consume. But we are hopping around the screen and poisoning things. So we scale Frostbite stacks on the enemy, poison stacks on the enemy. We scale our own melee critical strike chance way above 100% chance, and we even build vitality, which gives us another more multiplier. So with all of that, we have a very cool looking melee build that applies a singular stack of a damage over time, and we scale it to the moon. If you've been following along on the YouTube side or on the Twitch side at twitch.tv/parrythepig, you've seen me do absolutely dumb damage to some of the tankiest monsters in the game, including the new Pinnacle boss. We literally kill him before his first slam goes off, and my gear could be much better. So my gear's fine right now. Our defensively, we've been focusing a lot more on our defenses than we have our offenses, but that damage is pretty absurd given that we're not in our final form. How about that? So then we have a menagerie of questions that we will be discussing, like why is this build good now? Why, like how do we level this character? Why are we building melee crit? What do our defenses look like? We're going to talk about all those sorts of things. But I think the very first thing that we need to talk about is the big elephant in the room. Is this build bugged? So first of all, we are a bug. We're Swarmblade. It kind of looks like a bug. But not only that, the build is bugged. So people have been asking me on the Twitch side, is this build bugged? And I said no, because I didn't know what the bug was. And I don't want to make people think there's a bug when I don't have any confirmation about that. Now I officially have confirmation. We will be getting a dev post regarding this as well. So remember that we've had a survey go out in the past from EHG saying if builds are massively overperforming, but they're not bugged, should we nerf them? And the resounding answer was no. But this particular build, this is bugged, and it's not in a way that your player expectations would understand why it's bugged. So I do expect this to be nerfed, and I think that's fine. We will revisit this build at a later point in time to see whether being melee, whether investing in all this defense is still worthwhile to make this build work. I hope the answer is yes, because I had a lot of fun building this character. But we're gonna have our build contest coming up very soon, so we'll spend about a week on that, and then we'll come back to this build and we'll see how the bug fix has affected our enjoyment of this build. So what is the bug? It's a great question. So there's a node that just got changed in patch 1.1, which is Shattered Immunity. Shattered Immunity gives us more damage per poison, more damage per frostbite on the enemies, and it's doubled against high health targets. So I'm going to use Notepad. By Notepad, of course, I mean not Notepad. Let's bring up our Microsoft Paint here and explain what the bug is. So there's two separate more multipliers that are going on here. We have more per frostbite, and we also have more per poison stack on the enemy. So these are both very abusable. When I see these kinds of nodes with no cap on them, they're absolutely insane, and you would expect that you are able to scale it to the moon, which we did. These are also doubled against high health targets. So if the enemies are on high health, if they're above like 35% or so, then these are twice as effective as they would be otherwise. So I had this feeling like we really do a lot of damage. These are pretty abusable, but like one-shotting the endgame boss that just got added to the game is like pretty absurd. So I didn't know how to test it because we actually killed the dummy too quickly. But something like this, like maybe the high health multiplier was always active. So maybe these were like always doubled, and that was what was scaling it. But it turns out that it's slightly more egregious than that. So this nerf is probably not going to affect our clear speed, which is kind of mid-tier. You know, our clear speed is nothing to write home about. But it is going to affect the high-end damage, which is fine because, again, we one-shot the endgame boss. So maybe we could trim a little bit of damage off this. So it turns out what's actually happening on the backside is that we have 4 more multipliers. So we have more time, or I guess let's write it like this, like more per frostbite, and this is doubled against high health, and we have more per poison. And this is also doubled against high health. So I thought it was these two and they were just getting doubled. But it turns out that we have all 4 of these multipliers, which is not apparent when you hover over this node and you read it as a layperson. So these nodes, these are 4 separate more multipliers, and they're all active all the time. Not just against high health monsters, which is a little bit more damage than you would have expected. So it's not that these get doubled, it's just that there are 2 additional down here and they should turn off at some point. So this is slightly more damage than I would have expected out of this node because I didn't, I'm not a developer. I didn't know how this was coded on the backside. So yes, the build is bugged. I expect a dev post regarding this early next week, like either the 15th or 16th of July, and I expect that it'll get bug fixed shortly thereafter. It's brutal. Brutal, dude. Should still be playable. Yeah, hopefully this should still be playable. Is it going to one-shot the endgame boss? Hopefully not. I don't think any solo player should be one-shotting the boss, especially with, like, you know, B+, A- gear like I have right now. Like, I don't have S tier gear. So that's the state of the build. So in full transparency. But hopefully my dream is that Serpent Strike Swarmblade form is a playable thing to do. I like not making fun of skills. I don't want to make fun of Forge Guard for still being kind of mediocre after the rework. I don't want to make fun of Marksman, but I feel like I should when they are bad. So hopefully Serpent Strike ends up being something good, because, you know, even before Serpent Strike got reworked, I really did like it. So I want to use it, and I want to feel like it's not a meme. So that's that. Let's talk about a few other things here. Let's do a rundown of the build, and then with the help of Twitch chat, I've collected a number of frequently asked questions, things that people have been asking about the build. Why do we do this? Why do we do that? How do I build the character? How do I level the character? We will all have those in separate YouTube chapters. Feel free to browse around so you can find out exactly the answer to the questions that you are looking at. So first things first, let's talk about what our current build looks like. We're going to run through the skills, masteries, and gear just to give you a rundown of what that is. And remember, the link to this build will be in the description of the video as well. So in our build here, we have Swarmblade form. Swarmblade form is our primary skill. It does have the minion tag. Remember, that's going to be important later on when we talk about gear, because +2 to all minion skills does give us plus levels to Swarmblade form as well. So there is that. In Swarmblade form, the most important things for us are getting the tornado stuff on the very top right, because we're going to proc tornadoes in order to apply extra poisons and in order to apply extra frostbites. So applying more stacks is good. So we have tornado here. The other important part for us is the needle-like sting, +10 base critical strike chance. Why do we care about crit chance so much? Is because Serpent Strike cares about crit chance as well. So as we get a bunch of flat critical strike chance, and then we also scale over 100% chance, because that'll give us extra more damage multiplier. Think about this as like the old Disintegrate plus Ignivar's Head and Gambler's Fallacy interaction that just got nerfed for Disintegrate in patch 1.1 as well. So we have the base crit, we have tornadoes, and then I'd say the other most important part about this is all the way to the bottom left, which is getting some maelstroms. The maelstrom will give us even more lightning procs. Those lightning procs will apply more frostbites and poisons, and then it also gives us frenzy, haste, and you have some extra fluff nodes, but I've opted into a tiny bit of dodge and a tiny bit of healing per second over here. We can talk about that later when we get to the healing and the life recovery section of the video. Your extra fluff points are getting the extra poison chance or attack speed, or opting into more dodge armor stuff here. So those are fluff. Those are like non-mandatory points. Those are just like however many levels you get above level 20. Those are what you're spending your points on. Serpent Strike is the other half of this. Remember, in Swarmblade form, we've spec'd in this node called Viper's Call. It says the tree applies to Armblade slashes, but does not require a spear, which is great because it allows us to dual wield instead. So we do not get dexterity scaling. You see, if I hover over this, it says cold melee area strength attunement. It does not get dexterity scaling. It also does not have the 140 poison chance inherent to Serpent Strike, and it does not have the poisons effect 40% longer. But the rest of the skill tree does work for us. So just these first couple things here do not apply. For our build, we're going to spec into everything on the right side, because this is our damage. This is like the entire point of the build. We'll grab some extra attack speed, and I've opted into converting our bleed chance into frostbite chance, again, because bleed doesn't do anything for the build, but frostbite does based on the shattered immunity node that I just hovered over. Also, we have some extra more multipliers coming in from Maelstrom. Maelstrom giving us a more damage multi, and bleed chance, like the bleed chance gets converted into frostbite chance. The reason for this is that, you know, it allows us to also scale cooldown recovery speed, because in Swarmblade form, if we have put 3 points in this, 3 points is our bare minimum, because 3 times 2 is 6, gives us frenzy and haste in Maelstrom. If we have 4 points in this, which is optional, 4 points allows us to hover between 8 and 12 stacks of Maelstrom, which gives us even more damage off of the Serpent Strike node, Swirling Carnage, that I was just hovering over. So it allows us to build cooldown recovery speed. It allows us to scale our damage in just one more way. Next up is Tornado. Let's take a look at this. Tornado, we're using this very similar in how like a Frostbite Swarmblade build or a Poison Swarmblade build or like a Lightning Gathering Storm Swarmblade build would be using it as well. So just all the lightning procs on the top, we put the Tornado on our head. It kind of lags behind us because we're playing online, but if you're playing offline, it's going to look a lot better because it'll actually stay on your head. And then a couple points in this Storm Orb frequency, and these last couple points, like I've got 22 points here. I think just having some extra movement speed is nice for a melee character. It helps you to close the gap sooner when you're walking up to an enemy, so you don't take as much ambient damage. So movement speed is it's very, very nice on this build. So either attack speed or you can opt into more Storm Orb frequency. One of those two things, whichever you're looking for. And then our very last skill is this Summon Thorn Totem. A lot of questions about this that have popped up on Twitch. So remember, Thorn Totem, we don't have access to it in Swarmblade form unless we have this idol. So this idol is a 4x1 idol. Just put it on your loot filter. You will find one eventually. It's good for the build. It will enable us to apply more poisons to the enemy based on the Shattered Immunity node. So our Thorn Totem will be spec'd for poison chance. It'll be spec'd for this extra cast speed to make our single target even better. Just a little bit of pierce on that. Remember, when you have the idol that summons the Thorn Totems on hit, that will use the Thorn Totem skill tree. So if you have 4, 3, 1 on these points up on the top of the Thorn Totem skill tree, every time that you proc Thorn Totem on hit, it will summon 5 Thorn Totems. So that is great for us. We've also opted into this Rotten Core node. If you leave the Rotten Core node off of your build or your version of this, I wouldn't blame you at all. It causes a little green explosion that you can see going on here, and it's cool, it's beautiful, it's also pretty laggy. So if you opted against that, I wouldn't fault you for it. So those are the skills. Let's take a look at our mastery as well. Our mastery is opted into lots of defenses for this build, especially because our current build is bugged and we have so much damage. I'm going for a lot of defenses here. So we even have 5 points in the newly reworked Cornered Beast. If you go on low health, you even get 5 seconds of this defense, even if your health ticks back up above low health. So this is a great change for life-based builds, this Cornered Beast node. We've opted into some life, some dual wield stuff. Honestly, if you wanted to not dual wield and use a shield or a Bastion of Honor in your offhand, Bastion of Honor kind of sounds like a meme, but we do have the ability to scale quite a bit of strength in this build, and that would give you some extra block chance against all the enemies that are nearby. And I think if this build fails for you, it's probably based on defense, not on offense. So even using a shield, I would certainly not use a shield for single target, but for clearing, I don't know how this build is going to feel post-nerf, but I would investigate, do I have enough damage in order to use a shield in my offhand? That'd be a good question to answer. Let's take a look back at our mastery again. Let's go to Beastmaster Shaman, and then we'll talk about our real spec, which is Druid. In the Beastmaster skill tree, they've removed the ability for us to get Aspect of the Boar on melee hit, and honestly, the lack of Boar on melee hit for patch 1.1, this change just happened. I think it's great. I think Beastmaster now has an identity that you can actually have Aspect of the Boar all the time. But for us as a Druid, we don't have access to this on melee hit, and it really feels impactful, which to me is a great thing. I love this change that only Beastmaster is going to have access to this on melee hit. Of course, that means that for us, for all the Primalist builds that I play, I will be putting 8 plus 3 or maybe 8 plus 4 points into this. So my Beastmaster tax, quote unquote, is much smaller than it used to be, but I will certainly still be paying it because I like taking less damage with these Ursine Strength and this little bit of Aspect of the Boar when I receive a melee attack. I'm also opting into some regen, but we're going to talk about this later when we talk about the life recovery for the build. In Shaman, we want Tornado, so we just need 5 points somewhere. I've opted into Armor while I have a totem active because we have totems basically all the time. And then in Druid form proper, let's take a look at this. So in various versions of this build, I spec'd into different things. Sometimes I spec'd into Strength, but currently we're spec'd into River Spirits. This is not a great node, but it does a little bit for us. Most of the text here is lost on us, but we care about this threshold, which is Frostbite Chance and Minion Frostbite Chance. It just means that our totems and all of our locusts as well have extra chance to apply Frostbites, which again scales our damage. So for our build, you could opt into the health if you wanted this. The elemental penetration doesn't do much for us, but just having a little bit of endurance and armor does sound great, so we're opting into this. This, personally, is my favorite node in the entire game. I just think it's such a good node. Goodness gracious. So Druidic Prowess, all 7 points there. Excellent. So we are applying, we're dealing poison damage. It's actually unclear whether poison damage, like the phrase poison damage, scales our damage. On the back end, it looks like Serpent Venom has the damage over time tag, and it looks like it doesn't have the poison tag, which is very strange to me because in Serpent Venom itself, it says that Serpent Venom is an ailment that deals poison damage over time. But the fact that it lacks the tag, and then Serpent Venom applying it also lacks the tag, I'm unclear about whether poison damage actually scales it. So for us in particular, it actually doesn't matter too much because my increased poison damage is comically low. So damage over time also applies to your frostbite stacks and whatnot. So I would err toward damage over time because I haven't actually tested whether poison damage works because I think it's a bug. It says it's a poison ailment. It says that it deals poison damage over time. It should scale with poison damage, but it's unclear. But more importantly is Nightshade Fangs, which has melee bleed chance, which again gets converted into frostbite chance, which is great. And then spell poison chance applies to all of our spells that we're proccing. So this is exactly the node that we want. A little bit of attack speed here. Some fluff points for percent increased damage and the rage decay, just to make your life a little bit easier so you can sit here in town and record YouTube videos. And then on the top of the tree, we have very important nodes, Rageborn. Before you pick up the Rageborn nodes, in your Swarmblade form, I would recommend putting 2 points into Grasshopper's Frenzy to help your rage get nice and cozy so you can stay at full rage all the time. But after you get some points into Rageborn, we are crit capped, we are scaling crit, we crit everything all the time with all of our skills. This will be more than enough to sustain all of our rage. So the top nodes in our skill tree are Hide Skin and Impervious. These are great sources of defense, and they even work with some of our new stuff that we get to use when we get to the gearing section. Percentage of endurance threshold added as ward decay threshold. So this makes our endurance threshold even bigger. It helps us with the inclusion of Wall of Nothing, that new unique body armor that I just looked at. It helps us kind of have a hybrid ward plus health build, and it feels quite nice. I like this. So we're a melee build. We have Impervious. Impervious is a less damage multiplier when hit. Feels especially good against bosses, but it's pretty good while clearing as well. We have just a tiny bit of dodge chance. If you got +4 to Serpent Strike form, you can get even more dodge chance. If you got flat dodge on your gear, you can scale that flat dodge quite well. But for us, just having a little bit of dodge and, killing monsters pretty quickly makes Impervious feel well worth the investment. I love these points here. So that is the mastery. Let's take a look at the gear now. We actually have a lot of gear swaps that we've been using while we've been working with this character. So I'll hover over these pieces of gear as well. But the essential pieces to this build will probably surprise you. I would say that the Peak of the Mountain is very important. Peak of the Mountain is very, very easy. It has an LP level of 0, so it's very easy to get this with like 2 or maybe 3 LP. So getting this with tier 7 Vitality on it gives us a way of getting a bunch of percent increased critical strike chance for this fast-acting Toxins node in Serpent Strike. And it also gives us a bunch of Vitality plus all attributes, which we use quite well because we scale Vitality and Strength, which gives us regen and armor and percent increased damage. And then Dexterity gives us... It gives us dodge, which we're scaling with percent increased dodge, and even attunement or intelligence, depending on, I guess attunement gives us percent increased damage based on arm blade slash. And if you're a mana-based build, we can talk about that later. But if you're a ward-based build with intelligence, the point is all attributes. Mwah, chef's kiss. Love all attributes. So Peak of the Mountain. Peak of the Mountain is an excellent piece of gear, and I would call it essential for the build. The second thing is a good weapon. A chitin dagger here, or chitin dagger, however you want to pronounce it. It has melee crit, flat as the implicit, which is perfect. Percent increased chance to poison on hit. Beautiful, love that. Getting this with tier 6 or tier 7 melee critical strike chance is exactly what you want. The rest of it ought to be melee attack speed, and then like chance to poison on hit. The last suffix could be pretty much anything. You could do poison penetration. You could do like chance to chill on hit. You could do chance to bleed on hit. Chance to bleed on hit only does something when you're taking this node over here, converts the bleed into frostbite, but some other suffix there. But the most important things here are maybe like some sealed percent increased damage over time, but the melee crit, percent increased crit, I wouldn't laugh at that. Melee attack speed, and then the suffix chance to poison on hit. That's the kind of dagger that we're looking for. So we have 2 essential pieces of gear. And then for the 3rd and 4th essential pieces of gear, I'm actually going to say the rings. These rings are extremely good. So Phantom Grip here gives +2 to all minion skills, which gives us +2 on Swarmblade form, which really helps you flesh out the defenses or offenses, whichever one you want to be opting into. And it's also a low LP level item, which means that you can get it with LP, like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 if you're playing a Merchant's Guild, pretty easily. Even getting a 0 LP one of these and tossing it into an egg with Nemesis seems like a reasonable choice. The other item here, this carcinization of momentum, really growing on me. I would call this essential to the build. Eventually, you would replace this with like a red ring of Atlaria if you're lucky enough to get one and also not throw it on the ground. So carcinization, this gives us a way to scale our movement speed. And again, we're a melee build, so we need movement speed because it helps us to stay safe. It helps us close the gap when we're running up to a pack of monsters and not just take a bunch of ambient projectile damage. So we don't ever use the crab. No one cares about that. But the armor, the plus alt attributes, and the fact that it's on a coral ring base with that 6 vitality. Remember that 6 vitality becomes 12% more damage based on the Spirit Viper node here. So it really is a really, really good ring. It's basically a mini ring of Red Ring of Atlaria before you get your endgame gear. I'm going to end up using this thing all the time on my different characters. So those are what I would call the essential pieces of the build. Everything else is basically just like as much defense as you can get. So at this point, I want to talk a little bit about the defenses and the life recovery for the build, because those felt like a little bit odd. A normal poison build or bleed build, like a normal ailment build, bleeding heart ends up feeling quite good because you're applying lots and lots of small poisons. But for this build, like our primary source of damage that we're scaling the most is this like single stack serpent venom stuff. So it was kind of funny watching the bleeding heart and life leech not feel quite as good as I expected it to. So while I was leveling, I used a bleeding heart for a while. I found the Aurora's time glass for a while, and I used it liberally. But really what felt the best was speccing into the nodes in Beastmaster for strength scaling and then percent increased health regeneration per strength, and then getting a little bit of flat health regen on my gear. So I'm going to recommend that to you. Another nice piece about this is it lends itself to helping while you're walking up to a pack of enemies. You know, I've said this before already, but you're a melee character, so as you approach enemies, you're going to be hit with projectiles, you're going to be hit with damage over time, and if you're only a leech build, you need to actually get to the enemy in order to start attacking it. But if you have health regen ticking constantly, then it helps have a buffer while you're taking damage, while you're walking up to enemies. So I think just like building health regen early, building strength early, and taking this node, I think that feels quite good. It also works really well with Vessel of Strife. Vessel of Strife didn't get changed or buffed, but it kind of did get buffed in the patch 1.0. There was a new blessing reworked for Laggin in the Monolith system, and this is a bunch of health regen and flat health regen. This node is much better than it used to be before 1.0, and having this plus like a Vessel of Strife, you'd like to have like +4 Swarmblade form or tier 7 health regeneration on your Vessel of Strife, but this felt great. I'm really happy with the inclusion of Vessel of Strife in this build, and it makes me want to play more Vessel of Strife Primalists in the future, because you have nodes like the Beastmaster node for health regen. If you're Shaman, you can do the Shaman stuff for health regeneration per uncapped endurance, or even this node at the very top, which is health regen per attunement. So there's lots of new health regen things here, and I think you're going to see lots of Primalists using a Vessel of Strife, especially paired with the next item we're going to talk about, which is Wall of Nothing. So Wall of Nothing drops from the endgame boss, but it also drops from in the end, in Fall of the Empire, I believe it drops there as well, from the Harbinger and Empowered Monoliths. So using a Wall of Nothing, it gives you a Ward Decay threshold, it gives you Endurance threshold. It's like this hybrid life plus ward body armor, and it gives Endurance threshold added as Ward Decay threshold. So I'm sitting here at 2200 ward. You'll see if I take this thing off, if I just put on my normal, like non-ward thing, this is like 23 vitality. I use this thing for bossing. So you'll see my ward will drop down pretty considerably. But I've really been enjoying the combination of Vessel of Strife plus Wall of Nothing. I would be shocked if there aren't more builds out there taking advantage of this, because it's quite the combination here. A nice note about Ward Decay Threshold is you've seen the graphs about people, let's see, can I, what can I do? Can I go like this? I'm going to go like this. You've seen the graphs that people have made about what the new Ward Decay formula looks like. And a good note about this is Ward Decay Threshold. This is like the new Ward Decay stuff, right? Ward Decay Threshold. So this is like the 4,000 point. This is the 4,000 point where it's actually about the same to sustain ward in patch 1.1 as it was in 1.0. Ward Decay Threshold takes this entire thing and moves it to the right. So it's Ward Decay Threshold is actually quite nice because it moves the entire thing like this. So it's easier to sustain, you know, instead of 4K, maybe like 5 or 6K, depending on how much Ward Decay Threshold you have. So it's a pretty cool little piece of technology, and it works well with the changes that have been introduced this patch. So Wall of Nothing, love it. I wish I had tier 7 vitality on it. I'm still going to farm one up because I think it's quite a nice piece of body armor. For the rest of our gear, While you're leveling, you could use a Bleeding Heart. You could also just use any old thing that has percent increased critical strike chance or damage over time on it. A Nihilist drops from the endgame boss, and like we use it well. We don't care about the health regen, but you know the resistances, the armor, the implicit's insane. So this is an awesome amulet. If you don't have one of these, something like an Aurora's Time Glass is also a high-end unique item. But you know, even finding a 0 LP Auroras means that you can toss it in the Nemesis egg and hopefully get some kind of relevant text on it. Aurora's Time Glass is a nice stepping stone. Bleeding Heart is a nice stepping stone before you get your health regen stuff set up. Or if you're looking for YOLO DPS before this gets nerfed, you could even use the amulet. Oh goodness, what's it called? Serpent's Milk, which allows you to apply way more poisons based on your minions' poison chance. So that's a good option for YOLO DPS. But I think Nihilist is a great middle ground and gives us +2 skills. For our glove slots, there's a good conversation to have about scaling cold resistance. In our Serpent Strike, if you get like +3 or +4 to Serpent Strike, you can start doing dodge rating per cold resistance. And then you could also use Frostbite Shackles, which not only have Frostbite chance to help scale your Shattered Immunity node in Serpent Strike, but they also give you a little bit of extra ward retention for the ward-based defenses that we just talked about using Vessel of Strife and Wall of Nothing. So Frostbite Shackles could be a good option here. I happen to find some Ravenous Void, and they happen to have melee attack speed, and my jaw is on the ground because that's totally insane. So I'm just using this, and you know that the extra defense that you get from Ravenous Void applies to your ward as well, so I'm happy to have that. I don't know if this is a bug, but my Void barriers currently count up to 6. I don't know whether that is a visual bug only, or whether it's like an actual bug, but my Ravenous Void, you're supposed to only have 3 stacks of Void barrier, but every once in a while it goes up to 6 as well. I'm not sure why, so... Maybe EHG, if you're out there. I don't know what this is all about. Is it a visual bug or a real bug? Who knows? For our boots, these are covering all of our reduced damage taken from crits. We're using a Citadel boot with movement speed. I actually have a boot swap. For clearing monoliths, I use tier 7 movement speed. And then for bossing, I use tier 7 vitality instead. So that's pretty nice. We only have 40% reduced damage taken from crits. But you'll note in Serpent Venom itself, it says that it prevents enemies from landing crits. So for bosses or when you're standing in a big pack of enemies, as long as you're ticking something with Serpent Venom, it no longer has any critical strike chance. So that's a nice little piece of defense kind of built into the build. So I like that a lot. I think that about covers everything. Our belt's very generic. The high-end version of this build, whether you're looking for more defense or more offense, your belt would be a... Let's see, can we find... Where's the belts? I forget the name of the belt. We're going to go look it up. We'll do it live. This one, Viper Tail, has poison on hit, which is perfect. It has melee attack speed and dodge, and it's easy to get a Viper Tail with 2 or 3 LP. So a Viper Tail would be excellent for a DPS endgame option. Your defensive endgame option would be something like a Strand of Souls, just a whole bunch of ward retention and ward-based defenses. And then you get this like with 2 or 3 LP and slap some extra life on it. You get like armor crit avoid on it, or the crit reduction on it for some extra flat armor. But cleanse, I think definitely cleanse, especially if you're using Ravenous Void, right? So that about does it for the gearing of this. I guess the last thing here is this Cleaver solution. Because we are a ward-based defense, because we're stacking strength, and because we have a bunch of health regen for the Beastmaster node, rewarding us for building strength anyways, and strength gives us percent increased damage on our Serpent Venom. Cleaver solution is kind of a natural fit. If I had a Cleaver solution with tier 7 crit chance, I think I would just use that. Tier 7 crit chance and attack speed, tier 7 crit chance and damage over time, tier 7 crit chance and poison chance. Those are the kinds of things that I'd be looking for here. So I don't think just poison chance by itself is good enough. But yeah, so if you're going to continue dual wielding, I think that's the kind of thing you're looking for. This build really lends itself well to having like a setup for bossing and a setup for clearing. So clearing, like we already have a bunch of strength. You could just use a Bastion of Honor or a Bulwark of the Abyss, the unique shield that drops from this guy, and like get that with LP with a whole bunch of block chance on it, and it nearly caps your block chance. I think it's like 80 or like maybe like high 80s% block chance if you get a good roll on it. So something along those lines if you're looking for a defensive option while clearing. But for single target, we're just kind of YOLO DPS. How are those options going to change post Bugfix? I don't know yet, but that's what we're currently thinking about. For our idols next. The idols, we're using a whole bunch of elemental resistance while transformed. It helps scale our cold res in case we care about cold res someday, either with Frostbite Shackles or with Shot of Winter if we get +4 to Serpent Strike. but this helps us get all of our resistances here. You can see that my resistances are comically low without those idols. We have one 4x1 idol for the chance to summon the Thorn Totem on hit with some extra health regen on it, because health regen for Vessel of Strife, and then a tiny bit of poison chance and health regen while transformed. So that is what our idols look like. These 1x2s are hybrid health idols there. Looking at our blessings, God bless the new blessing system. Remember, if you are ever swapping blessings, there's been a lot of people who popped into Twitch chat asking how to change your blessings. And I personally think this is one of the best changes for patch 1.1. So let's go ahead and show you where that's located. In the end of time, if we combat roll our way over here, you'll see that there's a new vendor named something. And this allows you to spend just a tiny bit of gold and change any of your blessings. So this is just absolutely incredible quality of life. When I think about blessings, I conceptualize it like this. So I just look at the actual monoliths. So this is how I'm going to present it to you as well. All of our void res comes from this right here. Technically, your DPS option would be % increased critical strike chance, but we're already kind of suffix hungry, because we want regen, we want health, we want hybrid health, we want armor, we even kind of want flat dodge. So getting void res here I think is great. We talked about being a regen build, so we have regen here. For Reign of Dragons, instead of having, plus to all resistance, or instead of having like crit avoidance or something, those are the most common ones, we want to stack poisons on the enemy, so we're using poison chance. We want to stack frostbites on the enemy, so Age of Winter is a chance to apply frostbite on hit. From Spirits of Fire, this one is a little bit more normal. So this is just flat armor. It scales well with our % increased armor based off of our strength. And then everything else is just kind of fluff. So this is like, drop chance, drop chance, drop chance, drop chance. Just, use whichever ones you're looking for. I think there's a good reason for your Fall of the Outcast, especially if you're playing COF like me, to keep this as % increased experience gain, because your experience gain blessing from the Fall of the Outcasts helps scale how much favor you get. And favor seems to be at a premium, especially for COF these days. So that rounds out the character as we've been talking about it. A couple things we wanted to say about this build, just a little bit of a FAQ. People said, how do I proc the totems? We talked about that previously, is the 4x1 idol up here. Why are the totems there? The totems are there to apply extra poisons to the enemy. They're also there to increase the lag for the build. If you're playing this build and you really hate the Thorn Totems, you can instead opt into Gathering Storm. Gathering Storm would harmonize the procs off of Maelstrom and Tornado, because those both cast Storm Bolts, and you can scale the Storm Bolts with the Gathering Storm skill tree. It's also kind of cute. It allows you to scale Shock Chance as well. So it would give you plus 100% chance to apply Frostbite on hit. So you'd really just be taking it for 4 points in Jolting, 1 point in Frostbringer, and maybe 1 point down here for Lightning Strikes twice. Those are really just pretty much the entire skill tree, because you're not caring about anything else in the Gathering Storm skill tree. A defensive option, if you really hate Thorn Totem, would be speccing into Spriggan form and taking all the nodes that have to do with the Thorn Shield. And you would proc the Thorn Shield based off of 5 points in Thicket of Thorns in the Druid Mastery. So those are some other options for you there. A lot of people have asked, why not the new Spear? So the new Spear is kind of interesting. This kind of goes with another question, is why not use a Spear altogether? So Serpent Strike needs a Spear because it says it needs a Spear. However, like we talked about, Swarmblade form says when you are using your Armblade Splash, it uses the Serpent Strike skill tree, but it does not require a Spear. So this node in Swarmblade form allows us to bypass the requirement that is otherwise inherent to Serpent Strike, which is the Spear thing. So why not play Bear's Tongue? So to me, I don't understand why you would use Swarmblade or Poison, what's it called? Plague Dragon's Tongue? I think the reason this question pops up so often is that it says the word Serpent Strike on it, and that's like, neurons activated. It says Serpent Strike, it must be good. So my understanding of Plague Dragon's Tongue, pretend like this and this. Can we, you know what? Can we do it live? We'll do it live. Where is it? It'll be like this thing, inspect elements. Can I delete it? All right, delete that. Let's go here. Sure, let's go here. Get this out of here. Inspect elements. We just, this, I feel like I need to make a point. People keep asking me, what does this item do? What does this item do? Goodness gracious. Okay, so this item is called Plague Dragon's Tongue. It, oh shoot, I forgot to delete something. Hold on, let's go delete some more stuff. This thing? This one? Okay, this is Plague Dragon's Tongue. It has melee attack speed on it. It has up to 100 flat damage, along with 100 as the implicit. And it's got some plus levels to skills. This is a melee crit weapon. You punch people with this thing. It has nothing to do with locusts. I know it says locusts. I know I made a joke about deleting all the text. Locusts they've been pretty bad in the past. And I know that they got technically a buff in patch 1.1. I don't think it's enough. So if you can use Plague Dragon's Tongue and make a locust build, more power to you. But when I look at this item, I think about Writhe. Or I think about like Warpath or something. Like I want to hit somebody with it, and I want to scale my melee crit damage because it has 200 flat damage on it, and it's got 47 melee attack speed. 47 is a lot of melee attack speed. So this is not quite something that's going to work for us. We would much rather have two weapons, both that have melee critical strike chance on them, both that have poison chance, both that have attack speed, both that have relevant implicit modifiers to them, and it even gives us the option to use stuff like Cleaver Solution, or even use stuff like a shield if we want more defense. So that is why we're not using the Plague Dragon's Tongue here. The last thing that I wanted to address, I guess there's two more things we want to address. One is, do I recommend this build for a brand new player? No, I don't think so. So first of all, it's bugged, and we don't know what this build's going to look like post bug fix early next week. But it's got some weird scaling to it. It's got like vitality as a more damage multiplier. It's got melee crit chance. You scale your crit chance over 100, even though you're not a crit build. It's got this weird thing like frostbites and poisons. It's not like the most tricky build in the entire game. But for a brand new player, I think there's flashier, more interesting, more straightforward stuff that you could be doing instead. If you want to play it, awesome, more power to you. But as a brand new player recommendation, I think I would err away from it and err towards something that's a little bit more straightforward to build and to play. Even though it is cool, I do like weird scaling. The last question is, how do we level this character? This is something that showed up a whole bunch. So let's pop open letools.com and just show real quick how you might level this character. The short answer is painfully. So I got some special help from Dread, who has been playing a whole bunch of leveling characters, and he definitely plays Primalist stuff more often than I do. So I did some leveling testing before patch 1.1, and what we settled on was the first thing you spec into was Thorn Totem, and you'd make a beeline for the Titan's Bane node, along with 1 point into Forested Expanse. So I think probably 1 point in Forested Expanse first, and then like beeline for the Titan's Bane node. After that, you'd spec into Swipe early on in your leveling process, and you'd want this node up here, a bunch of points for Avatar of Stone. So you put down a totem, and then you swipe a whole bunch, and this swiping gives you extra spell damage on your Thorn Totem. After that, when you get some extra points, you would... Let's put some points in here. After that, you'd spec into Serpent Strike, and you would just have you'd have Serpent Strike leveling up in the background. And then once you get to your Druid form, once you get your Mastery, once you get Spriggan form here, this is around level 20 for your character, you would drop Swipe, you'd respec out of this, and you'd spec into Spriggan form instead, and you'd get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 1 point, maybe even 2 or 3 points into Unbound Garden. So this allows you to be a Spriggan, walk around, summon your Thorn Totems, and you're like a Spriggan plus Thorn Totem build. Is the leveling good? I hated it. I thought it was atrocious, but you know, it's a primalist life. Your early game is not particularly strong, but I think that's the strongest thing to do. What could you do instead? Just be a twink and make as much LP gear as you can, or put on Netflix in the background and just have yourself a good time while you're leveling to level 35. So after you get to level 35 or so, you will put your points into Swarmblade form. So in Swarmblade form, you have much, much better leveling. You'll spec into Swarmblade form, and I think the most important thing for you to do here is get that base critical strike chance, because the base crit, along with Grasshopper's Frenzy, helps you maintain rage, and it helps you stay in Swarmblade form even longer. So this is the first thing that I would do in Swarmblade form. When you are leveling, when you're playing with your Swarmblade form, you will... let's walk up here real quick so we can load into a combat zone. While you're in... while you're leveling with Swarmblade form, you can be a Serpent Strike build. Like, you're still going to be applying Serpent Venoms and whatnot, but by and large, you will be relying instead on a crutch called Swarm Strike. So you swap into this, And a lot of your early leveling for any Swarmblade form character includes putting down some locusts, waiting for the locusts to come out and start attacking enemies. They'll swarm the enemy. You walk up to the swarm of bugs on the ground and you click R. You click Swarm Strike. Boop, just like that. What will happen is it summons a big AoE, like a dark cloud around your character, and it's actually a melee damage over time. So it scales off of the flat damage on your weapon, percent increased melee damage, percent increased physical damage, things like that, percent increased damage over time, and that is a really, really strong way of leveling. So you'll still be punching things, you'll still be applying Serpent Venoms, but most of your leveling as a Swarmblade relies heavily on, summon Hive, wait for some locusts to spawn, and then boop, click your Swarm Strike. So as you get better gear, you'll be able to, basically be Armblade / all the time and only be applying Serpent Venoms. But as you're getting everything spun up, this is your crutch. So use your crutch liberally. It's nice to have a good leveling experience. So that about does it. Like I said at the very beginning of this video, the build is bugged. We don't know the impact of the bug. We don't know how the build is going to feel post-bug. But we are going to go announce our build contest. So that will be coming up on the YouTube side shortly. We're going to announce that starting on Monday, going for a full week. And I'll talk about what unique item we're going to build around there. So I will be playing in the build contest, trying to come up with sweet ideas for the unique item that I announce. And then after that's all done, we will revisit this character, make a YouTube update, and talk about what this build might look like going forward. Hopefully it's still playable. Hopefully the loss of damage isn't too much. Also, hopefully it does not one-shot the endgame boss, because I don't think anything should one-shot the endgame boss. The mechanics are good. The boss fight's fun. I don't want to one-shot the endgame boss. But that's it for now. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions about it, make sure to leave those in the comment section of the video. Yeah, and I will see you next time.